Age of Mythology. Now, this game came out in late 2002, right in the midst of a gaming trend that had seen RTS games such as Command and Conquer and StarCraft become gaming sensations that took the internet by storm. Ensemble Studios, the development team behind Age of Mythology, decided that they had had enough of their historical titles, Age of Empires 1 and 2, and wanted to take their experience and skills in a new direction. This created, in my opinion, one of the best RTS games ever made. With Age of Mythology retold right around the corner, I thought now would be a perfect time to go back and look at one of my favorite games and see if it still holds up today. I'm going to be playing back through this game on Titan difficulty to challenge myself to use every game function I can to win, and before you mention it, I will not be playing through the Chinese expansion for two reasons. I have read that with it installed, the AI becomes completely brainless, and it wasn't around when I was growing up. I want to re-experience what I played countless times as a kid. In addition, it's not even made by Ensemble Studios, so it's not really a part of the vision of the game that they had originally intended. Our first mission opens up with our antagonist Arkantos, who is not actually a mythological hero, he's completely homebrew and made up by Ensemble, defending the port at Atlantis. Pirates have attacked, and we are tasked to defend the city until the Atlantean army can arrive. The tutorial mission itself is actually quite simple, but it gives you multiple tools at your disposal to complete the mission in a variety of ways. To the southwest, you have a small village producing resources and a few military buildings to recruit new soldiers. On lower difficulties, the villagers can mostly be ignored, and their production of resources passively will be enough to get you through the mission. But on Titan, you will need to invest early into more workers and purchase upgrades to your units at the armory in order to survive. I love this. Many games have difficulty challenging both new and experienced players, but here you have different paths to go down that work in different ways for different players on different difficulties, leaving each experience extremely open-ended and perfect for a tutorial mission. The pirates slowly send more and more men to attack before one large invasion lands just as the Atlantean army arrives to save the day. The pirates retreat, but not before they steal Poseidon's trident. This, along with the Krakens attacking, is a sign that Poseidon no longer favors Atlantis because it is staying neutral in the Trojan War. Arkantos is sent to retrieve the trident and intervene in the war to regain Poseidon's favor. Shortly after leaving Atlantis, Arkantos' ships spot more pirates and they disembark on a nearby island to deal with them. This mission is our first with one of Age of Mythology's best features: God powers. Every time your civilization levels up, you will have the option of choosing between two gods. Each one comes with a host of benefits and a unique recruitable at the temple. The enemy forces send occasional patrols of men towards your base. They aren't too much of a hassle as long as you build a few soldiers. With this being the first true mission, let's talk about resources. The Greek faction produces their resources in an extremely normal way most RTS players would understand. Task men to mine gold, chop wood, or farm, and they will passively do the activity before returning to a resource drop-off point. The unique resource this game introduces is faith. This is a necessary resource for upgrades relating to which gods you choose, as well as producing mythic units at the temple. The Greeks produce faith through assigning villagers to pray at the temple. The main issues on this map is a lack of gold. There is a mine right next to your starting base, but it is within range of an enemy tower on the hill above it. This tower will shoot any villager who tries to mine gold. When I tier up, I choose Ares. My plan is to use his mythical unit, the Cyclops, to destroy the defenders with their unique ability, which throws an enemy unit into the air, dealing massive damage to it when it lands. Because the Cyclops are great frontline tanks, I prioritize my soldier production at the archery range. This gives me a ranged unit to deal damage while the Cyclops tanks, but it is also resource efficient. All units in this game take two types of resources to produce. For infantry and cavalry, it takes food and gold. For archers, it takes wood and gold. And for myth units, it takes a resource, normally food, and faith. My plan will allow me to use all of my resources with no overlap. The archers will use the wood and gold, and the Cyclops uses food and faith. The enemy forces do have one trick up their sleeve. As they are the Egyptian faction, they get access to a unique myth unit that can jump over my Cyclops and deal damage when they land. Fortunately, Arkantos is a hero type unit, and he can deal bonus damage to enemy myth units who will make short work of them. With the enemy base destroyed, I sent Arkantos to duel Kamos upon the cliffs. As the fight ends, Kamos jumps off the cliff, and lands on a sea monster which ferries him away to safety. At least we have the trident back. In the next mission, Arcantos arrives at Troy and is greeted by our first actual mythological characters, Agamemnon and Ajax. We are tasked with destroying the Trojan docks to prevent their navy from harassing our fleet. Since we just landed, we will have to establish a new town center nearby. Since the Trojans are an organized force, they send more and much stronger patrols of forces than the pirates did. I choose to age up with Ares for the Cyclops, and later Dionysus for one of my favorite myth units in the game, the Hydra. The Hydra and its aquatic counterpart, the Scylla, or Scylla, I'm not sure, both function in nearly identical ways. As they defeat enemy human units, they gain additional heads, which grants them more damage. The Scylla are interesting because their depiction in-game does not even remotely match their appearance in actual Greek myths. Ensemble must have intentionally changed the design to be more in line with the Hydra's appearance. I constructed a few defense towers to watch my northern flank, while I send my army to defeat the first Trojan dock. Half a dozen Hydras make quick work of their defenses, and then I send everything I have to the second, much more defended dock. This dock is guarded by one of the strongest units in the game, the Colossus. The Colossus is a massive unit that towers over the battlefield. It deals incredibly high single target damage to both units and buildings, and has one of the highest HP pools in the entire game. As they are a construct, they also don't cost any food, only gold and faith to produce. They have so much HP that I don't even manage to kill all of the defending Colossus before I kill the docks and win the mission. In the next mission, we are introduced to another legendary hero, Odysseus. Odysseus and I get to spend some time bonding over our mutual hatred of Agamemnon's war plans. He wants us to attack the front gate of a heavily fortified city. What could go wrong? Unfortunately, he's the leader of the siege and we have to do what he says. The struggle with this mission is a severe lack of gold. There's a few distinct ways around this problem. We could seize the enemy gold mines around the map. All of these mines are guarded by Trojan soldiers and already almost completely empty. We could circumvent this issue by utilizing myth units that don't require gold, such as the Minotaur. And lastly, this mission also has a few donkeys running back and forth between two enemy town centers. When you get close, a soldier lets you know that we can disrupt their gold trade, which will prevent the Trojans from sending as many soldiers to attack us. The only issue is the donkeys are bugged. In order to generate gold, the donkeys move from a market to a town center. In this mission, however, the donkeys just move between two town centers. This makes no sense, especially because there is an actual market that when it is attacked, you get a voice message that tells you that we're disrupting their trade properly. But the donkeys are not going to this market. I think what happened here is that at some point in development, one of those two TCs that the donkeys were running between was a market. Ensemble must have changed that at some point and not realized their mistake, and that's how we ended up with this situation. But this does do a great job at teaching you that another way to make gold is through a trade system, which is amazing. The enemy fleet eventually will build up and take control of the water, so I invest some resources early into a fleet to destroy their docks and prevent them from harassing my fishing boats. I fortified the entrances into my base to give me more reaction time in case of an enemy attack, and I send my army east to deal with the fishing town that is trading with Troy. After that, Troy uses one of the most infuriating god powers there are, Truce. Truce prevents any units from attacking for an entire minute. This is so frustrating and terrible. I'm at the enemy base. They're not going to train enough units to stop me. This just forces me to sit there and do nothing for an entire minute. Eventually it ends, and my forces easily destroy the remaining defenders in the Trojan gate. Unfortunately, Ajax has gotten himself ambushed by Trojan forces, and we must call off the assault to save him. This is, however, the first map in the game which has relics. If you are familiar with Age of Empires, relics provide passive gold income. In Age of Mythology, relics provide a variety of buffs ranging from passive resource collection and speed boosts to damage and HP buffs. These relics are normally hidden in corners of the map, encouraging exploration for tangible rewards. The mission itself is fairly straightforward. I build up a wall to protect my flank, harvest resources and grow my economy, then send my army at the Trojan outpost that previously ambushed Ajax. The Greek plan is not working, and we come up with a brilliant idea. Build a big horse, put 3 dudes in it, win the war. Easy. Only problem is I have to be the one to build the horse, because everyone else in the entire Greek force have already gotten back on their boats and are hiding in the ocean. The key with this mission is to dispatch the Trojan scouts before they return to Troy. If they do, Troy will send waves of men at us, making our time extremely difficult. But since this mission is basically a wonder construction, I prioritize villager production, and I only need 1,000 wood to begin constructing the horse. The Trojans decide to attack my docks instead of my town, giving me enough time to complete the horse. The second half of this mission is amazing. It's as much of a stealth mission as you can expect from an early 2000s RTS game, but the goal is to sneak through Troy, capture some siege towers on the way, and then destroy the gates from the inside. Once the gates are down, Agamemnon's army will storm the gates. In addition to this, I get access to 2 level 4 Egyptian god powers, the Meteor Shower. This ability devastates anything in its area, and I win the mission before Agamemnon's army is even able to get to me. We are also introduced at this point, in the cutscene at the end of the mission, to Gargarensis, the true villain of the entire campaign.
The treetops, and is taller than the trees, and his voice through all the garden is thunder sent to bring. What is it, Kemsit?
Chemos has returned, sir. He lost the trident. He says the Atlantean was headed for Troy. The battle there will not last much longer once he joins the Greeks.
The siege at Troy is already over.
On their way back to Greece, Ajax and Arkantos get distracted when they encounter a Greek town that has been ransacked. They investigate and find that the bandits have overrun the town and imprisoned someone named Chiron. After a quick walk to the local prisons, we liberate the soldiers of the town and build up our forces to defeat the remaining bandits. This is a no-build mission, but there are some relics nearby that will generate us a small amount of resources, and we can use the soldiers that we free to quickly build up an army. No-build missions are always fun, but in Age of Mythology they do take away the god powers aspect of the game. You are never able to choose your own, which really limits creative expression in the missions. As my army is ready, I march up to the last prison to free Chiron, and most of the enemy forces appear bugged. They just walk past my soldiers, allowing me to get a good amount of damage in before they decide to attack. They must be coded to use a move command instead of an attack move command. The prison itself falls quickly and Chiron is rescued. Chiron tells us that the bandits were led by someone named Kemsit. He sent all of the prisoners to the North Road and they're constructing something there. It must have been what we saw on the previous cutscene when we met Gargarensis.
We'll take what stores we have in the ships and whatever these people can offer.
Arkantos decides to split our forces into 2 wings to find more resources. Luckily, this works out as only one area has good wood and one area has good gold production. Unfortunately, this forces us to split our resources between 2 bases. Until they are both up and running, we are at a huge disadvantage. The enemy forces strike quickly with lots of high-quality soldiers, so I decide to worship Apollo when I age up. Apollo grants the Underworld Passage god power, which will allow me to link up my 2 bases, circumventing the primary problem in this first half of the mission. While worshipping Dionysus would have been more beneficial in the long term, I wasn't sure of my abilities to survive with my forces being split long enough for Dionysus to pay off. To me, it was very obvious to use Apollo, so I'm not sure the devs intended for this as it effectively removes the mission's gimmick. But regardless, I love the way that this mission works with allowing the player different options depending on their comfortability with the early game challenge. Before I push out of my base, I age up to Mythic and select Hephaestus. I finally get a chance to use Colossus of my own, and I'm not going to pass up on that opportunity. We also gain the god power of gaining a Vault of Plenty, which grants a slow trickle of all resources, but it can be captured by enemy forces. We construct a fortress to begin producing the Myrmidon, an elite Greek infantry unit. All human units in this game work on a counter system, but it's not as simple as many games. Whereas other RTS games may have a simple system like infantry beats cavalry, which beats archers, which beat infantry, Age of Mythology has a different system. Infantry, archers, and cavalry all can be used for different purposes. For example, the hoplites are anti-cavalry, while the hipaspis are anti-infantry, while both are melee infantry units. The toxotes are anti-infantry, while the peltis are anti-archer, while both being archer units. This allows for much more diversity when constructing armies. All this goes out the door with the Myrmidons, however, as they counter all human units in the game from all factions. They even are strong enough with all their upgrades to hold their own against many myth units. We advance into the enemy base only because I've ran out of gold and need to find more to fund my Colossus army. A pincer attack from Colossi and Myrmidons make short work of the base, and we march into the pit Gargarensis has been digging.
They rush in red and purple, from the red clouds of the morn, from the temples where the yellow gods shut up their eyes in scorn. I will warn you, this once.
Enough babbling, coward!
I absolutely love that they made the big bad evil guy of this game a poet. It's just so funny to me. And Arcantos just not giving a damn about his poetry or his talking is just, oh, that's just the cherry on top. We find ourselves racing against time to destroy a ram before it can tear down a massive gate. We aren't sure what the gate is or what's behind it, but if the bad guy wants to open it, we probably want it closed. This is the first mission where I had to try multiple times to complete it, and it is hard. There are a couple passages around the map that must be destroyed in order to win. These prevent enemy reinforcements from arriving, and luckily, there are a few monsters which will help if you manage to find them. 3 of the monsters are Medusa, a ranged archer myth unit with a special attack that instantly turns any non-hero unit to stone, killing it instantly. These monsters and a small trickle of reinforcements allow me to assault the ram, which initially goes well, but I'm slowly whittled down. Eventually, with the ram at 0.7% of its HP, I fail the mission. So I try again, and things are going a lot worse, and I fail much faster than before. So I try for a third attempt, and on this third attempt, I almost perfect using the Medusa, and I narrowly succeed the mission. Gargarensis tells us that there are other ways into Tartarus, and then we are forced to run as rocks come crashing down around us.
So this one can be closed.
With most of our army dead and the way out collapsed behind us, we find ourselves lost in this place. Fortunately, some nearby shades seem trustworthy, and we follow them hoping they will lead us out. What could go wrong following a dead person who doesn't talk to you? We sneak our way through the map and slowly collect some relics. We unleash all of our god powers at the army at the end to fall quickly from the combination of lightning and hero units. Arcantos goes to pray at the temple to Poseidon, but nothing happens. Chiron suggests trying Zeus as maybe a different god favors us, which works, and a way out of this place is revealed. This is supposed to be a huge reveal, but there is one glaring flaw. For most of the missions in the campaign so far, including this one, our god has been Zeus. So, if you have been paying attention, this doesn't come as a surprise at all. Also, with us knowing that Poseidon does not favor us with earlier remarks from characters in the game, it's no surprise either that Poseidon wasn't going to help.
Admiral.
Finally, we arrive at part 2 of the campaign. Arcantos and his men find themselves in a strange land of sand and oases, Egypt.
And unlucky.
A local woman named Amonra somewhat manipulates Arcantos into aiding her. She tells him that her enemies are surrounding the area, and the only way Arcantos will be allowed to leave alive is if he helps her defend against them while her laborers dig up an ancient relic. With no choice but to help Amonra, we join her in her defense. This is our first mission using the Egyptian units. Egyptian recruitment functions similar but slightly differently to Greek recruitment. While both factions have a barracks, the Egyptians do not have an archer range, and they produce their only archer unit, the Slinger, at the regular barracks. My plan was to construct walls on each entrance and rotate my small force between the passes until I had enough forces to defend them simultaneously. I believed going into this that they wouldn't dare throw myth units at me in the first Egyptian mission, so I mass conscripted axemen, who are the anti-infantry unit. My defenses were rarely threatened, and their forces never broke through into my eco. We finished excavating the artifact and the mission ends. A solid introduction to the Egyptian faction. We could focus on micro with new unit types without having to worry about the new Egyptian ecosystem. Unfortunately, we did not get a chance to use Egyptian myth units yet. The artifact we recovered is revealed to be a massive sword belonging to a guardian at a nearby temple. Unfortunately, the temple is located within a stronghold controlled by worshippers of Set, and a massive army is tearing its way through the valley to reinforce the stronghold. We only have a short period of time to reawaken the Guardian or we fail. We start off by liberating some enslaved workers and escorting them back to their settlement. We construct a temple and some barracks while producing more laborers to boost our eco. Since we now have our own settlement, let's talk about Egyptian eco. The Egyptian faction has a few key differences than the Greeks. Primarily, Egyptian resource collection depots are all separate. For the Greeks, you only need to construct one building for wood and gold. The Egyptians must invest resources into two separate buildings for this purpose. The other main difference is that the Egyptian faction does not generate favor from worshipping at a temple. This means you need less workers for the same resource output. Egypt generates its favor through the construction of monuments. Each monument is more expensive, larger, and generates more faith than the previous ones. Egypt is capped with this, however, as they have a maximum amount of faith that can be produced, while the Greeks can scale much better by putting a theoretically infinite number of workers on a temple. I have also noticed that in general, Egypt has more upgrades relating to farming output and upgrades relating thematically to the Nile, which is a very nice touch of realism as the Egyptian agriculture and society was largely based around the Nile itself. As you can see in the minimap, the huge army is slowly making its way towards the temple, and I have to act fast. I launch an attack with a large number of priests, an Egyptian anti-myth unit which can also heal friendly units, aided by my hero units and a few scarab myth units. Scarabs are huge beetles that are tanky and deal great damage to buildings. This attack breaches the outer wall, but a huge counterattack of animals and chariot archers destroy my forces. I know I don't have much time left as there is one village left between me and the army, so I pool all of my resources into a final assault. Utilizing heavy elephants and priests, I narrowly destroy the enemy forces, and a steady trickle of reinforcements allow me to attack the inner walls and reawaken the Guardian just as the enemy army arrives. The Guardian absolutely destroys everything in its path, but ultimately it is a little underwhelming. Yes, it one-shots any unit it hits, but it only targets one unit at a time, has a fairly low attack speed, and moves quite low as well. So it takes a large amount of time for it to actually chew through the entire army I have to fight. And worst of all, a few units in the enemy army got bugged all the way at the beginning of the map, and I have to walk the Guardian all the way over to kill them. Eventually, we managed to win. We are then tasked to escort a piece of the dead god Osiris back to our city. If we manage to reunite this piece with the others, Osiris will be resurrected and will save us. This is a tug-of-war style mission, and I have to control the cart and not let it be taken by the enemy forces and brought back to their base. I send waves of cavalry and axemen to defeat the enemy forces who are no match. I even anticipated their ambush and quickly destroyed it. I am caught off guard, however, by the Rock, a flying transport unit that delivers a large number of enemy soldiers right onto my doorstep. Unfortunately for them, I had too many men nearby for their ambush to work. Mission 14 is another very difficult mission. Arkantos and everybody except Amonra has been captured, and Amonra must convert temples to our side and requisition local buildings to build up a force large enough to assault the stronghold and then attack the prison to free our soldiers. Due to the high number of enemy monuments that can be converted, I decided to build a large myth unit army. While this initially works, the fortress is so well defended and they produce so many high level units that my forces are eventually destroyed and my base decimated. I try again, and eventually I settle into a working strategy. I use siege towers to tank enemy damage, while a mass of infantry and slingers assault the enemy forces. I utilize a few myth units for their high damage output, but a well-mixed force eventually prevails through the stronghold. I damage it enough that the prison guards pull back to the fortress and I can sneak Amonra and some men into the prison. Unfortunately, even without the guards, the enemy navy repeatedly sinks my transports. To circumvent this, I requisition a nearby harbor and train a large number of naval vessels to escort my transports. We clear out the enemy navy, land Amonra, and liberate our fellow soldiers.
So, Setna, all the other priests of Osiris were imprisoned too?
Some were left to die in the desert.
But why did he want to kill Osiris?
Then you truly do not know.
You always seem to hide behind something when I see you, Cyclops.
You interrupted me in Greece, escaped the underworld, and arrived here before me. There is no way you did this on your own. I will know which gods support you. Now.
Lord Poseidon watches over all the people of Atlantis.
Lord Poseidon? You're more a fool than I expected. Let's see if he's watching over you now.
You may feel less like fighting after I pull off your head.
I swear, Ajax is like the funniest hero in this entire game. Just every voice line he delivers is just so good. Our prison break is not over, and we are still surrounded by our enemies. But before we escape, we need to capture the Piece of Osiris. We sail across the bay to a friendly settlement and build up our forces there. I slowly pick away at the forces to our north and decide to advance my age to gain the rock unit. Since the enemy has complete naval supremacy, I decide to use the flying transports to simply ignore the water. With my army overrunning the settlement on the peninsula and destroying the enemy lighthouse, I can finally focus on building a force strong enough to take the Piece of Osiris. Unfortunately for me, this is where my luck ran out. I couldn't find how to recruit the rocks. They weren't available at the temple or the dockyard. I ended up building every single building I could, besides the wall, one by one, and none of them had it. Eventually, I resorted to looking it up on the wiki, and it is supposed to be recruitable at the temple. Which it's not for me. What the hell? After wasting way too much time on it, I finally spam out some docks and mass-produce aeroships to gain naval supremacy. I land my force, take the cart, and break out of the southern gate in just a few minutes. After finally escaping from the city and re-securing the Piece of Osiris, Arcantos sits down against a palm tree and attempts to catch up on some rest. Falling asleep almost instantly, Arcantos finds himself talking to Athena in a dream. Athena tells us that Zeus was not always all-powerful. The Titans used to rule before the time of the gods. Suddenly, Athena disappears and is replaced with Castor, our son we haven't seen since the first mission. We head to a nearby temple and put a relic into it. A dozen Cyclops spawn, along with Gargarensis to destroy it. With the help of the nearby statues casting lightning, we move on. All of our heroes so far appear and aid Arcantos in defeating some Chimera before Athena reappears and tells us that the gods beat the Titans in a war and locked them within Tartarus. Poseidon has also been tempted by Kronos, and this finally explains why Poseidon hasn't been helping us out at all. We then have a small army that we need to use to break out of the underworld. I position my infantry to block enemy reinforcements, and my artillery makes short work of the rock wall. We are then transported to another dream in which Arcantos is working with Gargarensis against the Greeks. We sail our army over to the nearby base and set up a home there, which is when I notice that our primary god is Hades? Didn't Athena just tell us that Poseidon was the god working with Kronos? Either Hades is also working with Kronos in my dream, or we have the classic issue of Hades being considered evil in Western media. Regardless, the mission is fairly straightforward. I need to take my army to destroy the Greek wonder inside their base. There are a ton of relics scattered across the map to make this task easier. Once again, Ensemble are encouraging exploration of their maps, and I absolutely love it. My original army was destroyed in an assault on the wall, so I train up a couple more. We also get access to Hades' unique unit to make this task easier as well. It's an archer unit with increased attack range and attack speed, which, while it is good, I personally don't prefer it as much as Zeus's Myrmidons. After a few human wave attacks, we break through the enemy defense and destroy their wonder. Our heroes decide to split up to gather the remaining pieces of Osiris simultaneously. Amonra heads to Kemsit's stronghold on a nearby island. The mission is extremely easy but fairly grueling. The enemy forces will not contest your base, so I invest heavily into all of my eco upgrades early, and I set up caravans to provide me with additional gold. I then build a few transports and send my men over to the stronghold. The enemy navy is too powerful to land on the island's southern shore, so I must fight along the entire length of the island before I can actually get into the enemy's base. I grind multiple waves of chariot archers and elephants into his fortifications and slowly whittle them down. It certainly wasn't the fastest or most efficient way of doing things, but it was definitely the least difficult. Unfortunately, at the end of the mission, I discovered a massive bug. At some point in the mission, Amonra died on the island, and her body disappeared, preventing me from reviving her. And despite me killing every single enemy unit and wiping out the entire stronghold, I can't actually win the mission if Amonra doesn't walk up to the Osiris piece. I play the mission again on my own to win, and Amara walks up to the piece and the mission ends. We catch up with Chiron, who has found the location of the head of Osiris. It is within the base of the great tamarisk tree, which will need to be chopped down. As Chiron speaks with his men, a strange band of soldiers arrive. It's a group of Norsemen who say they have come to Egypt to follow Gargarensis and stop his plans. Gargarensis is revealed to have rallied the giants of Midgard to his cause. This is a great bit of storytelling because it changes the narrative from Arkantos and the others following Gargarensis closely and stopping his plans as they come up. This is a great bit of storytelling because it changes the narrative from Arkantos and the others following Gargarensis closely and stopping his plans as they come up, to Arkantos and his allies rushing around putting out fires that Gargarensis keeps making. Gargarensis is even causing problems in other regions we didn't even know about, making this seem truly like a world-spanning issue, not just isolated to the Eastern Mediterranean. This mission has a few great design choices. Firstly, we get access to a few Norse units, and this is a great way to tease the faction's unique features and let us play around with the units way before we actually get to go to Midgard. Secondly, the southern half of this map is a huge desert. There is barely any wood, and this forces players to contest chopping the tree if they need wood. Fortunately, the Egyptian faction is less wood reliant than the Greeks, and you can mostly get around the wood issue if you want, with good resource management and trading at the market. There are also tombs around the desert that periodically spawn mummies to attack my village. Destroying these tombs grant a large sum of gold. Getting into the mission itself, I discover the first tomb quickly and loot it for gold. Unfortunately, the tomb is hiding a nasty surprise, as two scarabs pop out of the tomb as it is destroyed. I began walling off sections of the river crossing to protect my base, as well as producing more priest units to quickly kill any myth units the enemies send at me. I went into this mission with a plan. I was going to wall off all but one entrance on my side of the map to force the enemy units to attack there. I built up lots of towers to defend it and slowly built my eco up now that it was protected. Once my army was as large as it could be, I quickly assaulted the enemies around the tree. I tasked most of my villagers to cut down the tree as fast as possible just as the large enemy army reinforced the area and I lost most of my men. I start producing more soldiers from my barracks and the army manages to hold for the rest of the mission while my villagers finish cutting down the tree. Arkantos and Ajax have made their way to Kamos's stronghold and his naval defenses are extremely strong. We are going to have to find a way to get past the harbor and attack him. The beginning of the mission is fairly straightforward. We make our way to the beach and free a small Greek temple from Kamos. In doing so, we capture two pirate ships which can be used to sneak past the enemy gates. The Greek villagers also tell us that they will produce colossi for us. We land just west to the enemy stronghold and build up our small town nearby. There is very little space for us to grow our base, and worse yet, a villager tells us there is basically no gold, which means we won't be able to produce many soldiers. There are a couple ways around this that the mission gives you. You can early transport some villagers back to the Greek temple to mine the copious gold reserves in the area safely, but the pirate navy will eventually realize that you aren't friendly and attack your ships. The second option is to push into Kamos's base. There are several gold mines early on that you can use for yourself. I opt for the first option, but I acted too slow. Kamos has spotted me and I will need to build a strong navy to control the sea so I can safely escort my villagers to the gold mines. I construct one of my favorite naval units, the war barge, a giant ship with a ballista on it, to slowly clear out Kamos's navy. With my gold production now secured, I turn my attention to raiding the bottom half of the stronghold. The war barges have a lot of range and a ton of damage. I use them to destroy dozens of buildings in the bottom half of Kamos's base. By the time I send my army in, Kamos has no way of stopping it.
What was that you said before? Something about hanging my head from your ship?
Your head will still decorate a mast, even if I'm not the one to lash it there!
With Kamos unable to survive jumping off a cliff twice, all of our heroes bring their forces to Osiris' temple. Unfortunately, they all start in different areas, and to make matters worse, Ajax and Arkantos are late, meaning the enemy can focus their forces on my two bases. This mission is similar to an earlier one we had in the campaign. Before, we got around the separation utilizing the underworld passage god power. This time, however, trees are the only thing that's stopping us. I horribly mismanage my bases and they take considerable losses, but with that delay over with, we connect our bases and get our eco up and running. By the time I'm ready to start pushing, Arcantos and Ajax have arrived with the final piece. My 3 armies push forward, slowly overrunning different defensive lines before merging together right before the final push. All the carts have arrived and Osiris is revived just as Gargarensis arrives with an army.
Gargarensis still breathes. Come on. We're too late.
Gargarensis manages to flee Egypt, so our heroes pursue him north to Midgard where the last gate lies. With the second of 3 acts over, Ensemble decides to take a well-deserved break. Arcantos and Ajax spot some crashed ships that they recognize as Odysseus's, so they decide to land and investigate. A mysterious woman waves her staff in the air and our heroes are transformed into boars. Now able to speak pig, the pair of heroes discover that the pigs in front of them are Greek soldiers and that they had also been transformed. This is one of my favorite missions. The first half of the mission sees Ajax and Arcantos rampaging around the farmland, attacking villagers, killing wolves, and freeing other pigs. Our small army of swine sneak past 2 fortresses and towards a nearby temple of Zeus. Zeus restores all the pigs to their normal states, and we start the second half of the mission with a small army. Your starting soldiers and villagers in the second half of the mission directly correlate to the number of pigs you are able to rescue in the first. With my village nestled right up against the enemy walls, there is no hiding our presence and multiple enemy raids attack us. We build up a small army and I construct a few colossi as siege units, and the enemy forces quickly crumble and we rescue the last few pigs.
I thought I'd end my days as a pig on this miserable island. I owe you for rescuing me, but I must return home. Thank you, Arcantos.
You owe us nothing, friend. We can spare a ship for you and your men to sail home in.
With the hunt for Gargarensis back on, we arrive in Midgard, where Gargarensis ambushes us and causes an avalanche which separates our soldiers. I unite our disparate forces in the best defensible position I could find, and now let's talk about the Norse faction. The Greeks are the basics of any RTS faction, and the Egyptians add unique changes which make the faction feel similar but alive. The Norse are even crazier. Norse collection depots are mobile ox carts that can travel to wherever your villagers are. This prevents the need for building new depots each time you move locations, but does require an initial food input to get going. The Norse are also unique because they have 2 different types of eco units. They have regular villagers, but they also have dwarves. Dwarves cost gold instead of food to produce, but they are only efficient at mining and have a terrible time chopping wood or farming. You may have noticed as well that the Norse have flipped the construction system on its head. Norse villagers only have the ability to construct farms. All of their buildings are actually produced via their combat units. The Norse are a very offensive-focused faction. Their combat units being able to construct means they can aggressively build new military facilities and fortifications right on your enemy lines. In addition to this, while the Greeks produce faith through praying at a temple, and the Egyptians produced via monuments, the Norse produce faith by beating the crap out of everything you see. Combat produces faith for the Norse, which allows the highest faith production of any faction as long as you are playing aggressively. Back to the mission. There are 3 threats on the map that need to be eliminated to win. Each are temples spawning various myth Norse units. In addition to this, an enemy base regularly sends waves to attack you, causing you to almost always have an enemy force you are fighting. I tier up to H2 with Forseti, who grants me 2 key things: a healing spring, which passively heals any units nearby, and the Troll myth unit. The Troll throws rocks at afar and has fairly high DPS. I plan to use them to be my main DPS unit in the mission. The only issue with Trolls is that they are very slow and take a lot of damage from enemy units, making them extremely vulnerable to enemy attacks. I tier up to the Heroic Age with Scotty to gain access to the Frost Giant unit, a lumbering frontline tank whose special ability freezes the target for a few seconds. It is an amazing unit and probably one of my favorite in the game. With a sizable army under my command, I strike out and destroy the first temple. The second temple falls without much of a fight, and now it comes time to attack the last temple, which is tucked away behind enemy base. But at this point, I have way too many units and then steamroll the enemy forces.
We'll have to find another way through.
We are being watched.
Where?
Wait here.
As we resume our hunt for Gargarensis, Amon spots two dwarves watching us from the shadows. The dwarves, Barak and Itri, want our help in clearing out their mines. They have been infested with giants and want our help reclaiming them. In exchange, they will let us use their mines to traverse to the other side of the mountain, saving us a lot of time. We get the dwarven duo as heroes in this mission, only they are pathetic at killing myth units and pathetic in combat. They are actually considered a hero version of the regular dwarf unit with slightly more HP and damage, and they're just not worth it. I task them to work at a mine the entire mission and just forget about them. The enemy forces attack quickly and with a lot of giants and trolls, making securing your starting area extremely difficult. I opt to construct my army of primarily Herseer, a Norse unit that generates extra favor and is good against myth units, as well as Valkyries who in my opinion are kind of niche. They have an amazing healing ability, but I find that their damage and health are both too low to be actually used in combat. With my army ready, I push to the forge and easily capture it. The forge itself has a few very expensive unique upgrades that make my units considerably stronger. This is also around the time I notice I can construct a wonder, an immensely expensive building that starts a timer which causes me to win the mission when it is over. I decide I don't want to win the mission that way and opt not to construct it. I looked more into it later, and even if you construct it, nothing actually happens. There must have been an oversight during the game production that allowed this to sneak in. It shouldn't be available in campaign missions. With the forge survival timer at 3 minutes, I haven't seen the enemy army yet and I get bored. I send my army into the enemy base and it gets absolutely annihilated. This also prompts the enemy army to start attacking the forge. I quickly rally together some reinforcements and save the forge before it can be destroyed. Brock and Itri don't come with us into Midgard, but in reality they are following us and just don't trust us yet. We also learn that the god Loki has destroyed Thor's hammer, and without it the Norse are powerless to stop Gargarensis.
A hammer, and destroyed it. He has no power without it.
Excellent. I may not have to kill you after all, Kemsit. Let's go.
As we continue on our journey, we run into an old Norseman named Skult. Skult promises that if we bring him with us, the Norse clans will stop fighting and listen to what we have to say. The only issue is we have to get through a mountain pass filled with giants to do so. Our small force of Greeks and Norsemen find a rockfall blocking our path near an abandoned settlement. We are going to have to build some siege units to destroy the rockwall while defending the area. Waves of giants assault us, but we manage to pump out a few rams who break down the rockwall just as the main giant force arrives to crush us. We quickly evacuate our army, but the giants are too fast, and I let the army distract the giants while our heroes escape. When we arrive at the Norse clans, they do stop fighting when they see Skult's banner. Unfortunately, they attack us instead. In order to complete this mission, we are supposed to use the banner to lure out the Norse clan leaders, then ambush and kill them. Once they are dead, their remaining units become ours. The only issue is, it's actually way slower to fight this the intended way. Instead, mass assaulting the enemy bases and then clicking on the clan leader with my entire army is 10 times faster. Most missions in this game take around half an hour, but this one took me exactly 7 minutes on Titan. I'm sure it can be done in less than 5 on lower difficulties. Skult starts laughing maniacally and then explodes in a cloud of ravens. A Valkyrie arrives and explains what happened in detail. Skult's banner is used by Volstagg, a giant who raids this region, so Skult tricked us into pissing off every Norseman in a 20-mile radius. Technically, Skult didn't lie though. He said the banner would get them to stop fighting, and it did. This should have come as more of a surprise, but once again, our major god the last few missions was Loki. While I like the reveal, now knowing that they often tie the twists in with the major god you are actively worshipping is starting to ruin the surprises. This Valkyrie, Regenleaf, is the one who sent the Norse Chiron met in Egypt. In the next mission, we have Thor as our major god, so we know we aren't being tricked by Loki anymore. Anyways, we are tasked with allying ourselves with a few more Norse clans in the area. Each one has a different task which needs completed. The first village just wants a nearby cave cleared out and they will join us. The second village wants our help defending their town and asks us to construct a few watchtowers. The third village wants us to raid an enemy base and rescue the chieftain's daughter who is trapped inside. The enemy base is heavily fortified and has lots of soldiers. As I begin my assault, the nearby trees come to life and start attacking my army. I pull back and try to regroup but lose a good portion of my men. After rebuilding my army, I launch another assault and it takes a few waves before I manage to overwhelm their forces. We finally figure out where Gargarensis has gone. He's located nearby at something called the Well of Urt. This well allows a person to travel into the underworld, and Gargarensis is using it as a way to attack the next gate of Tartarus. As we have arrived at the climax of the Norse campaign, we are faced with one of the most difficult missions yet. We are tasked with destroying the enemy forces and getting to the Well of Urt. The only issue here is Gargarensis' forces attack early and often with plenty of high-level soldiers. First off, I grab a nearby relic and garrison it inside my temple. This relic grants me a pair of lions, which I use as an early warning system against any army coming from the northeast. Thankfully, you get Regenleaf as a hero of this mission. She has the Valkyrie ability to heal, and I rely on this heavily at the start to keep my units alive while I invest in my eco. Wave after wave of enemy assaults strike our base. Eventually, the enemy patrols stop coming, and I decide this is the perfect time to counterattack. I clear out the small enemy TC to the west before sweeping north and attack the Well of Urt. I clear the fortifications around it but die to the defending army. My second assault succeeds, and with that, we have captured the well.
Do not let the appearance fool you. The well will take us to Niflheim.
You go first, Chiron. If you fall screaming to your death, we'll just stay here.
When you decide which of you will go first, I'll be waiting at the bottom.
As we enter the underworld, we find the ram already working on the gate. We need to act fast. The map is split into two portions, the underworld on the right and the overworld on the left. I spent a lot of time and resources investing into my overworld. The only gold resources, however, are in the underworld, so you must send your dwarves down to mine. I invest more and more time into upgrading my base, but by the time it's up and running, I've already microed just my hero units and killed the guards defending the ram. There was also an enemy base somewhere above ground I never even bothered to find as the underworld portion progressed so fast. Chiron knows we're not going to be able to outrun or outbeat the amount of giants that are coming, so he sacrifices himself to block the path by collapsing a giant rock. This gives us just enough time for us to continue on with the mission. We have reunited with one of our dwarf compatriots, Brock. He is mining away at a nearby taproot. He tells us that he needs to mine the taproot to construct the shaft of Thor's hammer. Once the hammer has been rebuilt, Thor will close the gate to Tartarus, saving the day. Eitri is also on the way, and he is the hammerhead. We will need to wait for his arrival and then bring the hammerhead to the taproot. There are two main strategies for this mission. Put all of your dwarves on the taproot to get it as fast as possible and then head to where Eitri spawns. And the second is to split your miners and have some work on gold production. As you collect gold in this mission, it is sent back to the overworld, and in return you gain more units to defend the dwarves. As the dwarves mine away, I have my heroes slowly work their way around to where Eitri spawns, clearing any giants and trolls on their path. Eitri spawns and I rush him over to the taproot. Unfortunately for me, a giant dragon spawns and I have nothing to deal with it. Regenleaf is the only one who can defeat it, and I have her on the opposite side of the map. The dragon in the meantime is killing all of my dwarves. She finally arrives, saving my dwarves and killing the dragon, and shortly after, we unite the two pieces of the hammer. Thor's hammer flies towards the gate, sealing it just moments before Kronos could escape. The resulting explosion creates a hole in the earth, scattering our remaining forces above ground. With the Norse gate now sealed, Gargarensis is sending his army straight towards Arkantos and the gang to kill them once and for all. We only have a short time to build up before he attacks. Fortunately, there is an abandoned mining colony nearby we can set up a base in. I start building my base and importantly walling off the different entrances. I only have 10 minutes to prepare and the walls will buy me even more time. I age up and worship Skadi for her frost giants, but also importantly for her god power Frost. Frost is the Frost Giant special attack on steroids. It freezes every enemy unit in a large area for a very long time. Unfortunately, it dramatically boosts the defenses of the units that are frozen, so it is best used to buy time or to pick off one or two high value units while the rest of the army is frozen. I figured I would use it as the former, anything to get more time as I didn't think I was going to be ready in 10 minutes. I planned for most of my army to be comprised of axemen, a high DPS ranged attack infantry that counters enemy melee infantry. I hoped that my hero units would be able to hold off against any myth units long enough for the plan to work. At the 10-minute mark, Gargarensis shows up with an entire army. Skult offers us the chance to surrender.
We will offer you a chance to surrender. If you give up now, we'll grant you a quick death. Otherwise, I promise you it will be long and painful.
And Ajax shows us just once more just how amazing of a character he is. He fires the ballista next to him, killing the Huskarl next to Skull, before asking Skull to move closer. I was expecting a huge assault, but the enemy ended up coming in waves of smaller patrols which I could deal with one at a time. Wave after wave of enemy troops attack, and I did eventually manage to break through my rightmost defensive wall, but at this point my army was so strong that it didn't pose a real threat to my base. After 20 minutes or so, Odysseus arrives to save the day. He comes with centaurs, some cavalry, and myrmidons, and honestly, I think my current army is actually stronger than the reinforcements he came with. Either way, I used the new force to launch a two-pronged assault into Gargarensis' base, and I discover he doesn't really have a base, just a set of walls. And he also is super weak and barely guarded. Something doesn't feel right here, but oh well.
Glad you changed your mind.
I was almost home. Then I dreamt of my city in ruin, and Athena spoke to me.
I know the dream. How did you find us?
Well, the horrible roar and the blinding flash of light were helpful.
That was the end of this one's dream. And with that finished, I think we should find some ships. Home beckons.
A fine idea.
Ajax.
You're sure you don't want to take him back to Atlantis? Put him in a cage somewhere?
No. He'll never set foot in my homeland.
This is for Chiron.
Gargarensis is dead, and we can finally sail back to Atlantis.
We'll make port before the sun sets. Bring out the head of Gargarensis. Lash it to the bow.
Yes, sir.
What trick is this? That is
As we
Kansas.
arrive back at Atlantis, we realize that Loki has tricked us once again. Gargarensis still lives, and judging by the square 2D trees that are on fire in Atlantis, he must be here. This mission is super fun. We start off with a large fleet and half a dozen transport ships filled with myth units and soldiers. Our objective is to secure a beachhead, build a base, and then rescue the Atlantean civilians being held prisoner. I get my home base set up and scatter around with my warships, picking off isolated docks and watchtowers. My myth units don't last very long, however, as the enemy forces sends attacks almost immediately. The whole city is against me, including their military production facility, so I'm going to need to act fast. I send a force in behind the enemy base to hit their production facilities, and then while they are distracted, a second force strikes the enemy's front gate, smashing through them. I slowly push through the city, liberating the civilians, beating the mission. I'm not sure why you don't have to rescue all of the civilians in this mission, you only have to do 15. It's not a particularly difficult mission, so perhaps it was a design choice to prevent the game from lasting too long. Arcantos sends the remaining heroes to help evacuate the civilians and prepares for the final confrontation against Gargarensis. Gargarensis, however, is busy using the power of the Titans to animate the statue of Poseidon, which promptly reveals a final gate under Atlantis itself. This mission is quite difficult and can even pose a significant challenge on lower difficulties. Starting off, we have a small town center and we are flanked by our two allies. To the left, a small Norse village site that occasionally sends us a few giants. They also have a healing spring which I can utilize to heal my units. On the right, an Egyptian town. They occasionally send Anubites, and I can send injured units to their healers as well. Eventually, they will gift me with one son of Osiris, who alone is better than the 30 Anubites they give before him. The goal of this mission is to construct a wonder to gain the power of Zeus and use it to defeat the statue in Gargarensis. This time, the wonder isn't bugged and we can actually use it, although it still doesn't do the 10-minute cooldown to win. Ultimately, the mission is somewhat deceiving. It appears that you need to assault the enemy city and break through its defenses to defeat the enemy forces, but you actually need to defend until the wonder is built. However, there are reasons to expand into the city. Scattered around the map are various plenty vaults, and if you choose Hephaestus when you advance to the final age, you could have a total of 5 plenty vaults. This would turn a steady trickle of resources into a huge never-ending wave, thus encouraging exploration and aggressiveness but not requiring it for the mission. In addition, when you take a plenty vault, you are granted with an additional god power boosting your arsenal further. The enemy start off strong with multiple hero units accompanying each wave of soldiers. They will kill your myth units without careful micro, and you need to invest resources into building an army or building defenses. A few minutes into the mission, Gargarensis uses a god power to destroy the Norse base, exposing your left flank to attacks. Shortly after that, the Egyptians are destroyed as well, leaving you alone to face Gargarensis. Since I finally have access to the Myrmidons again, I use them en masse and construct dozens to defeat the enemy forces. Finally, the wonder is complete, and Zeus has granted us the power to turn Arkantos into a demigod. I rush Arkantos through the city, destroying everything in his path, and reach Gargarensis and the statue. They are easily defeated by Arkantos' new power, and Gargarensis dies from the trident impaling him, and the day is won, but Atlantis is lost.
Atlantis. The entire city is lost.
Only the buildings. We rescued the people.
What about Arkantos?
And with that, the main campaign of Age of Mythology is over. But what will come of the Atlantean people, and what is next in Arkantos' story? With that, we head to the expansion, New Atlantis. Ten years later, the Atlanteans find themselves barely surviving on a desolate northern wasteland. Castor, Arkantos' son, is now an adult and appears to be one of the two leaders of the Atlanteans, the other being Krios. The Atlanteans believe the gods have abandoned them, but thankfully, Krios has received a vision of an ancient temple that may lead them to salvation. We get our hands on the Atlantean civilization right away, and this is because the DLC is not trying to hold your hand. It is substantially more difficult than the base game, and it assumes you already have a lot of experience going into it. The Atlanteans overall feel like the Greek civilization, but on steroids. Starting off, their villagers are extremely expensive, take longer to produce, and take more supply to build. They are a combination of a regular villager and a Norse ox cart. As they collect resources, the resources are directly deposited into your stockpile. There is no need for them to return to a depot, which overall speeds up your economy. The Atlantean units are also very Greek-inspired. Overall, they are more expensive in cost, supply, and recruitment time, but slightly stronger than the Greeks on average, who already had very high-quality infantry. The main twist the Atlanteans get is that any unit can be upgraded into a hero unit, including all villagers. This makes the Atlantean civilization extremely versatile and able to easily defeat armies of myth units. Starting off, I primarily produce Arcus archers. They counter infantry, and I will be using them religiously in almost every mission of this campaign. The surrounding area is extremely desolate, and I must hunt and forage for food while chopping the scattered trees around the map. Luckily, the new Atlantean villagers are perfect for mobile resource collection. The enemy Norse tribes in the area send raids consisting of cavalry and infantry. They are aggressive and attack early and often, forcing you to divest resources from your eco and enter your military early. With my army built up, it's time to put a stop to these raids before moving on to find the temple Krios spoke about. Castor and my Arcuses find and easily destroy the first Norse encampment. Since the second encampment utilizes cavalry, I produce some Murmilos, the anti-cavalry infantry unit. Shortly after, the second base quickly falls as well. The sky passage to the temple itself is heavily defended, and dozens of axemen chew through most of my army before I finally win and destroy the two hill forts nearby. I load everyone in my base into the sky passage, and we find ourselves in a resource-plentiful land with two ruined temples nearby. Krios finally reveals what gods favored us and brought us to this fertile land. And it's not gods at all, it's the Titan Uranos. The Atlanteans decide to return the favor to Uranos by restoring his temples nearby. Some Greek inhabitants of the island seize the Atlanteans repairing the temples nearby and are furious. Before we get into the mission, I just want to say that there is only one guy in the Atlantean army who is skeptical of this. The war against Gargarensis and Kronos only happened 10 years ago. I assume all of the Atlantean soldiers still remember those events. They should be extremely distrustful of Titans, but I guess in their time of desperation, they turn to anyone who would listen. The mission is fairly straightforward. You build up your base as the Greeks attack you with various patrols for a few minutes. Once you have aged up and restored the two temples nearby, you need to destroy the Greek barracks just outside of the city and then the Greek city itself. Only problem is, the difficulty of this mission is extreme. The Greeks level up their units far faster than you and send significant attack waves. I try again and again and keep failing. Eventually, I stumble across a strategy while looking for help online. There is a small island at the bottom of the map with all the resources you need to build up. So I start again, and this time rush to age up, build the dock, and then transport everyone I could to the south. I spend a long time on the island to get every upgrade I could before launching my plan to recapture the old base and then attack the Greek city. It goes stunningly well at first. I destroy the small Greek settlement, reclaim my previous settlement, my army pushes into the enemy base, destroying their barracks and then attacking the city. The city is heavily defended and they have dozens of military production buildings inside. I send waves of men slowly pushing into the building, destroying 1 or 2 buildings each time, but always being thrown back shortly thereafter. After a grueling hour and 45 minutes, I realize that I haven't gotten the mission to destroy the city yet because I haven't repaired the 2 temples at the start. No real problem, right? Well, it turns out that at some point I accidentally clicked on one of the 2 shrines before I abandoned the base, and it had like 7 HP repaired on it. Unfortunately, this meant that the temple was attacked and destroyed by the Greeks, and it was impossible to continue the mission. So I restart for the 10th time and try again. This time, I send a few naval invasions into the back of the Greek base, severely damaging it and destroying multiple barracks, archery ranges, and stables. With their production extremely diminished, a few armies make their way through the base and slowly whittle down their TC until it dies, taking about an hour and 20 minutes total. This mission was tough, and I decided here that since the difficulty of this campaign was significantly higher than the base game, I was going to make the decision to turn the difficulty down to hard instead of Titan. I couldn't justify doing 10 more Titan missions. My recording for this mission alone was 4 hours long, and if every mission took half that time, I estimated my recording size would be about 350 gigabytes of footage just for the DLC missions, and I didn't have that much extra storage space sitting around. So I apologize, but I gotta do what I gotta do. Some Greek soldiers manage to escape and are able to warn the Greek commander Melagius of the impending arrival of the Atlantean army. General Melagius calls for their allies, presumably the Egyptians and Norse, to come help. Castor arrives with 4 soldiers but plenty more on the way. There's no town center here, so we will have to make do with the few starting villagers, and hopefully more will come as reinforcements arrive. To supplement this resource collection, there are plenty vaults scattered around the map. Once again, these vaults are not integral to the mission's completion and can be entirely skipped as the objective is just finding Melagius and killing him, but they provide an incentive to both the exploration and clearing out enemy forces. You have no way of generating favor in this mission, and as far as I can tell, you just get 5 favor every once in a while. This doesn't make much sense, and I feel like is the one real issue with the mission. There are a series of statues around the map that, if destroyed, grant various boons, from a large sum of favor to archer statues that defend the area for you. I think with a little more thought, they could have had a system of replacing the Greek statues with Atlantean ones for a favor trickle just for this mission, or at least added more of these statues to destroy around the map to gain more consistent favor. It would encourage further exploration of the maps as well, but alas, they don't do this. There are various fun side objectives to complete on this mission as well. Right next to our starting area, there is a fishing village you can raid, and then they will fish for you. To the north of our spawn, there are Scylla in a swamp which can be killed, and there is even Polyphemus's cave filled with Cyclops to explore. I get access to the satyr unit for this mission. It's somewhat strange because the satyrs are Greek from my understanding, and it wouldn't make sense for them to be a Titan's unit, but who knows. Anyways, the satyrs throw spears for devastating damage from the backline, and in combination with my infantry, allow me to capture the vaults one by one. I build up fortifications and amass 2 armies in a pincer strike on the Greek base. My first army attacks, drawing out the Greek forces, and then my second strikes from behind, attacking their undefended fortress. Melagius quickly falls under my united forces, and the mission is won. The Norse and Egyptians arrive, and they are too powerful to defeat, so Castor decides to attack the Norse and Egyptians at their home now that their armies are in Greece.
There are too many. We cannot fight against them here.
You're going to let them get away with this?
I did not say that. I said there are too many to fight here.
Castor and the Atlanteans have arrived in Midgard to defeat the Norse at their home. We are here more to send a message to the Norse than actually destroy them. Nearby are various holy sites surrounding the main temple to Odin. We are tasked with destroying each of these temples and replacing them with Atlantean ones. We are given 2 god powers and a building ability to make this happen. Firstly, the region is extremely mountainous, and in order to get to different areas, we will have to use a god power which teleports all of our military units to any location we can see. Once in these locations, we fight our way to the temple and use our second god power to destroy it. Once it is destroyed, we will use our building ability to shift our own temples into their previous locations. Doing this will weaken Odin's tower and allow us to attack it. To start off, we are in an extremely secure location, surrounded by mountains and impenetrable woods. I take time to invest into my eco and neglect my army, not expecting to need to fight for a while. This is when I was truly shocked. The Norse used the god power forest fire to ignite the trees next to my base, allowing them to attack me. I was not expecting this, as this power is not utilized to this capacity at all in the main game. I scramble a defense and barely manage to push the attack back. I take a few moments to stare in wonder at the clever game design and use of god powers that completely caught me off guard. With the Norse attacks not stopping, I switch my military production into high gear and move to wipe out the first Norse base. I steadily stream reinforcements in and the Norse crumble. I destroy the temple and replace it with my own and prepare for the next attack. The Atlantean scout unit, the Oracle, is pretty garbage, but when it stops moving, it gains a huge line of sight, and I can use this to teleport my men directly onto the next base. I rinse and repeat this for 2 more times, and then my army overruns Odin's temple. Arkantos goes to Amonra in Egypt and warns her of the impending Atlantean attack, which makes me wonder, why doesn't Arkantos just go to the Atlanteans and tell them the truth of what's happening? Arkantos is Castor's father, the savior of Atlantis, Zeus's chosen, a demigod, and probably just a mythological figure for the Atlanteans at this point. Surely he could convince them, right? Anyways, the Atlanteans arrive and we have to steal 4 Egyptian relics and bring them to our temple. Each one we return grants us the use of a god power, which is needed because we lack the ability to age up in this mission. I wall off all the entrances except for one and decide to try out a new unit, the Automaton. It is a fairly cheap melee myth unit, and while it does not have exceptional stats, it has the ability to repair other automatons, and if an automaton dies, there is a brief window where other automatons can reconstruct it, bringing it back to life. Utilizing the automatons and arcuses, we clear out the mission easily. The Egyptian and Norse factions have left Greece to return and defend their homelands. Krios tells us that he knows the location of a nearby passage that will allow us to get into a flanking position and attack the Greeks. As Krios has yet to lead us astray, we march on. This passage, however, does not lead to Greece, but instead it was a backdoor into Olympus. This mission is truly unique and fantastic. We can utilize any temple nearby to turn our soldiers into whatever myth unit the temple is dedicated to, and since we periodically get more soldiers, we have a never-ending supply of myth units. Initially, we utilize the Cyclops temple to smash through Olympus's guards before I eventually diversify my forces and have Cyclops, Valkyries, Hydra, and Colossus. One of the god powers we get in this mission is to turn enemy units into pigs. I have a great idea and send the pigs to a nearby temple to see if they can be turned into myth units, and while they do get turned, for some reason they are controlled by the temple's faction and not my own. I'm not sure if this is a bug or intended, but oh well. Anyways, we attack the summit of Olympus itself and easily overwhelm the defenders before escaping into another sky passage.
What is happening? Something is wrong. An Olympic passage! Quickly! It is our means of escape!
Ajax is out for blood and wants Castor's head, but Amonra urges him for a more peaceful resolution. Meanwhile, a Titan has emerged from within the Greek city just as Castor and the Atlanteans arrive. Krios reveals himself to be some kind of monster from the underworld, and Castor and the Atlanteans realize that they have been tricked into allowing the Titans to escape. In this mission, we are back to controlling an Egyptian faction with Amonra and Ajax. The Titan sends waves and waves of only Prometheans to attack us, and since they are a myth unit, I mass-produce priests. This is a fun but fast mission, and ultimately, the main issue is the same one that every mission with only one unit type faces. It can be easily countered, and even on Titan difficulty, I barely had to pay attention as my priests annihilated the Prometheans. The Titan eventually attacks, and we send some rocks over to the Atlanteans. Arkantos appears and informs the gang that there are Titans in Egypt and Midgard that will need to be killed first before returning to Greece.
Weaken them. If that is allowed, the greater ones can emerge.
So, there is a Titan in Egypt. Now?
Yes, and one in the Norselands. You will have allies in these places.
We go to Egypt first.
The Egyptian Titan destroys the Temple of Osiris, and all seems momentarily lost, until Amonra explains that the local priest of Osiris is actively working to resurrect our old friend the Guardian, and he is now our last hope against the Titan. This is quite a challenging but very fun mission. We have to wake the Guardian up before the Titan attacks, but we are often attacked with waves and waves of enemy soldiers, and the priest can be tasked to fight instead of resurrect, but this takes away critical time we need to awaken the Guardian. The mission is also barren of gold, and the only hope we have is an abandoned camel caravan scattered around the map that can be used to trade with the nearby neutral settlement. Even with the trade income, gold is rare, and I'm not going to be able to build a mass army of priests this time. I plan to go heavy into food production and actually make one of my least favorite myth units, the Anubis. This unit jumps into combat for bonus damage and is quite fast. Combined with only taking food to produce, it makes them a perfect myth unit to supplement my army and protect my caravans. I love how this mission design turned one of my least favorite myth units into one of the best ones that I'm going to use probably every time I do this mission. I scout out and find all the caravans to get them trading as soon as possible. I build walls to defend the caravans and station an army nearby just in case. Around the priest, I build walls protecting almost all sides and construct plenty of towers. The enemy uses rocks to airdrop forces into my base, but luckily I'm ready for it and they are quickly defeated before they do too much damage. The Guardian wakes up and absolutely demolishes the Titan. It's not even a close fight. As we arrive back in Midgard, we are greeted by Fullstag, and if you remember this guy's name, it's because he's the one whose banner we were tricked into using by Skult in the campaign. It's nice to be able to put a face to the name. We join forces to defeat the Titan, who is honestly quite weak. Fullstag is a super strong version of the Frost Giant, and his breath attack is able to freeze the Titan. We need to survive long enough for the Needhogg, the dragon we fought in the main campaign, to be called in, and then it will be able to kill the Titan. The allied bases in between us and the Titan will not survive long enough to bring the Needhogg in, so we'll have to micro Fullstag and use his breath attack to keep the Titan at bay. My infantry hold off wave after wave of enemy assaults, and finally the dragon arrives and together we slay the Titan. Our heroes return to Greece to find the Titan has devastated the city and even the land itself. However, a small patch of extremely fertile land grows nearby, and Arkantos appears once more and tells us not all Titans are evil, and that Gaia is a force for good who will aid us. We need to reconstruct a few town centers within the ruined city, which will spread Gaia's influence. Then, and only then, the Titan will be weak enough to fight. With Gaia as our primary god, we have a brand new selection of god powers. We can create a Gaia force instantly to boost our wood production, or it can be used to plug holes in walls and prevent enemies from getting through. We have spiders, which kill enemy units that walk over it, and we have a power to instantly steal an enemy unit for ourselves. I start the mission by walling off our northern approach and using the tree plower to plug one of the two gaps in the wall to our east. I build up and then sneak some villagers behind the Titan to stealthily build the TCs I need. I accidentally draw the Titan into a fight well before I'm prepared, so I decide to use the mythic god power that sucks all things in and then explodes, sending the units flying in every direction. It predictably doesn't do anything to the Titan, but it still looks pretty cool when I use it. With lots of archers in my hero units, I managed to take Prometheus down. And I just noticed, this Titan is Prometheus. Isn't he a good Titan? He gifted humanity with fire to help them. Why is he attacking us? Well, it's too late to ask questions now, because I kind of murdered him.
You have done well. Kronos' servant is still at large, however, and he has the Atlantean army at his command.
Where is he?
The Atlantean colony.
Yes, you must destroy him to end this.
Not much of a challenge after dealing with Titans.
Castor, only you can stop this, my son.
Mission 11 is really cool, but it honestly doesn't work that well. The gimmick with this mission is that the city is abandoned but is filled with statues. These statues are actually automatons that come to life and attack when you get close. This is supposed to be a big reveal, but it honestly falls really flat. We have already seen and used automatons in multiple previous missions, so it's not surprising at all. I think this mission would have been better suited earlier in the campaign, or they should have not allowed the automatons to be used in earlier missions. Anyways, we fight our way through the Atlantean city to find Krios and rescue some Atlantean civilians. Again, it's another gimmick mission, just like the Promethean one. All you need is hero units, and you absolutely slaughter everything in your path, since it's just one type of myth unit. We find Krios at the city summit and attack, but he escapes once again. We have arrived at the finale of the DLC. Kronos is about to break out of Tartarus, and our band of heroes must stop him. Our one chance is to summon Gaia and she will deal with Kronos herself. In order to do this, we need to create and protect 4 summoning trees which will bring Gaia. The game tells you that you can't lose any trees, and this is only partially correct. You can't lose any trees before you have gotten all of them. Once the summoning has started, you only need to keep 1 tree alive. I used Gaia's Forest God power to block off the eastern tree and planned for 2 armies to rotate between the remaining 3 trees. Unfortunately, Krios' forces attack fast and I lose 2 trees. The northern tree dies before I can get forces to defend it, and the eastern tree I believed was safe wasn't so protected after all, and Krios' forces walk into it uncontested. We've got bad news. Kronos has finally made his way out of Tartarus and there's no stopping him. I still have a few minutes before Gaia is summoned and I can't let all of the trees be destroyed. Fortunately for me, Kronos has no object permanence and is the mind of a child that is easily distracted. He spends the next few minutes chasing my army around the map instead of trying to attack the trees. Gaia is summoned and she destroys Kronos easily. She then creates a giant tree on top of him to keep him sealed away forever. Kastorf personally takes his revenge on Krios, becomes the sole leader of the Atlantean people, and our story concludes.
That is over.
If you've made it this far in the video, I just want to say thank you so much for your support. There's a couple of extra things I wanted to discuss that didn't really fit in with the narrative of the campaign, so I'm going to go through them here. Firstly, like all games, Age of Mythology comes with cheats, but unlike many other games these days, these cheats are not just to make the game easier. Most of them are just super fun and crazy ideas, like Fear the Forage, which makes little bush monsters walk around. Oh Canada, in which you get a freaking bear that flies around at Mach 10, shooting lasers out of its eyes and beating people up with its monkey sidekicks. Or Baka Baka Boom, which grants the chicken meteor god power, where chickens fall from the sky and explode once they hit the ground. I absolutely love games that aren't trying to be too serious and are just focusing on making a fun and enjoyable experience. The game also has a super nice and easy to use encyclopedia. All you have to do is right click on a unit portrait and it opens it up. It outlines lore, unit archetypes, faction diversity, unit stats, and even gives some descriptions for every single thing in the game. Each page has hyperlinks connecting it to other pages and is a really great tool for newcomers that the game will never once mention to you. For example, the appendix on Falstad explains why the Norse used to hate him and why by the time of the DLC, 10 years later, he's friendly with the Norse and has the ability to summon the dragon. There are also funny jokes written into some of the entries as well, like the chieftain's daughter we rescued in Midgard, who has this description. Another thing you may have noticed in the background is that each of the units for each civilization say different things when you move them around and order them to do stuff. As far as I can tell, these are actual phrases and words in ancient Greek and Egyptian. I'm not sure exactly what they used with the Norse and Atlanteans, but it's so cool to see a game where the devs took the time to scour libraries and early 2000 internet for ancient Greek and Egyptian phrases. It's just little details like that that truly amaze and shock me at just how far Ensemble was willing to go to ensure the game was more lifelike. Plus, when my brain hears prostagma, etimos, or volime, it just is filled with nostalgia. The last thing I want to do is give my overall opinion of the game and the 2 campaigns. Fall of the Trident, the main campaign, is an amazing experience. It's not very difficult, but it has excellent mission design and the voice acting is perfect. The major issues I faced was the Norse section of the campaign felt short and like they were trying to wrap it up fast, while the Egyptian section sometimes felt excessively long. I would rank the difficulty of the campaign at a 5 out of 10, and the story at a 9 out of 10, while enjoyability is a 9.5 out of 10. The New Atlantic campaign is the perfect length for a DLC story, and it's about half the size of the original missions. Its story is a continuation of the original one, and I love to see our old friends make their reappearances. The maps are amazing and designed with a lot of detail and exploration in mind. The missions themselves are far more challenging. Ensemble went into the mission design and wanted to challenge the players to think creatively with their units and use of god powers. The Atlantean civilization also feels like it fits perfectly into the game balance with the 3 other factions. Unfortunately, my main issues with this campaign are the 2 missions where only one enemy unit type was found. They were somewhat boring and not challenging at all. In addition, the automaton mission right before the finale would have been a lot more impactful if we hadn't interacted with automatons yet. I feel like Ensemble missed their mark with that. I would rate the difficulty at an 8 out of 10. Some missions were extremely difficult, but it wasn't too bad entirely. I would give the story an 8 out of 10 as well. Some things felt like they made no sense, like why did the Atlanteans somehow forget the war against Gargarensis and the Titans 10 years earlier that they would have all been alive for, and why did Arcantos never intervene to stop them? But it was still very good overall. And I would rate the enjoyability at an 8.75 out of 10. Not including difficulty means, I would give this game a solid 8.8 out of 10. It really was an amazing experience, and I would highly recommend anyone who likes RTS games to play it. Or wait for Age of Mythology retold. It's right around the corner.